Hey guys, welcome back. Today is a video that many of you have been asking me to do, and it's finally happening. Today's that day we're going to do it. This tank right here, the 𝗲𝗂𝘀𝗀𝗀𝗀 Aquascape, is currently running without any CO2, and today that's going to change. We're going to do DIY CO2 for this tank right here, and it's going to be one of the easiest DIY CO2 methods that you've probably ever seen out there. But before we add CO2 into this tank, the cheap and easy way, the DIY way, let's take a look at how a regular CO2 system works. So right here on this tank, the nature style aquarium, as you can see, I'm running CO2 in there. And if we take a look, this is what a regular kind of system looks like. You've got the CO2 cylinder right here. This tank is filled with CO2. You'll need a regulator to control how much CO2 comes out of the tank. And then you'll have a bubble counter. Some regulators will come with a bubble counter like this, while others won't have a bubble counter. So if yours comes with a bubble counter, then that's great for you. You won't need to buy a separate bubble counter. But for my case, I'm kind of running it different. If you look here, I've got another bubble counter on here. I really don't need that, but I kind of like the look of it, so that's why I have two bubble counters on mine. But right here you've got CO2 tubing. This is the hard type, the one that's really rigid and not so flexible. And then it comes up to a check valve right here. And then from there, it goes up. This is soft tubing. This is the soft silicon type tubing that's very flexible and easy to use. And it goes into the CO2 diffuser. So for a beginner, starting out with CO2, this might seem a little bit complicated. It can also be kind of expensive. It can cost you a few $100s to come up with a CO2 kit. So I understand that some people want to do it the easy way, and that's what we're going to do today. But if you guys are interested in a CO2 system, you can go check out 𝗲𝗀𝘀𝗀𝘀. This is an 𝗲𝗀𝗀𝘀 regulator, and I've got a couple more 𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 regulators that I'm using. They're really good regulators, so I highly recommend them. But today, we're doing it the easy way. I'm going to head out right now, gather some of the equipment that I need, well, more like the drinks that I need for this project, and I'll see you guys in just a short while. Okay, so just like that, we've got everything we need for this project right here. It's very, very simple. First of all, you're going to need your bottle. You can use any type of bottle, but I like the 1 liter Coke bottle. I think this works great. So I'm gonna drink this, and I'm not very good at drinking Coca-Cola, so it's gonna take me quite a while to finish this. So once I finish that, I'll show you guys an empty bottle, but you're gonna need an empty bottle. You're going to need salt. Well, sorry, not salt. I mean sugar. I don't know why I mixed those up, but sugar, just a little bit of it, or maybe more than a little bit, but I've got 1 kilo right here, that's more than enough. And then you're going to need yeast. This is dry yeast powder. And then you're going to need a bottle cap that has one of these things. And if you can't find one that's like this, I think they sell these on Amazon and eBay, but I was fortunate to get mine from Dean's Fish Room, so thanks Dean for giving me a couple of these things. This works really well for DIY CO2. If you can't get those, you can still make your own. You just get a bottle cap, poke a hole in it, or drill a hole, and you get one of these air tube airline connectors. And then you just stick that in. And it's kind of tough doing this with one hand. You can see we've got our own DIY little cap. Kind of the same thing, looks slightly different, but it's gonna work the same. And if you're going to use one of these, you should probably seal this. You can use some glue or something like that just to make sure it's tight, or silicone, so that the CO2 doesn't escape. So I say let's start putting all this stuff together and let's make some CO2. Okay, so I've roughly put about 150 grams of sugar into the bottle. So just like that much. And now we're going to put the yeast. So for 150 grams of sugar, I put a 3-gram sachet of yeast. This thing comes in 3-gram sachets, as you can see right there. And some yeast will come in 2-gram sachets. If you've got 2 grams of yeast, just do 100 grams of sugar. So now we're going to put the water in. You want to put warm water. I put around 700 milliliters of water, roughly around to this line. Okay, I probably should use the funnel here. I'm spilling water all over the place if I do that. You don't want to shake it just yet. Next up is the final step, or almost the final step. We're going to put the yeast in. We put a lid on, and I'm forgetting a bunch of parts right here. This lid doesn't have to be the one with a opening. You can just use a regular bottle lid right here. Close it. Give it a shake. Swirl it around, shake it around, and CO2 is going to build up in there. And while the CO2 is building up in there, we're going to get the other parts ready that I forgot to mention. Sorry about that. But like the CO2 hose, the tubing, as well as the CO2 diffuser. So let's get those ready right now. So what you're going to need are these two things. CO2 diffuser. You can even use an air stone, but I prefer CO2 diffuser. And then you're going to need your airline tubing. This is silicone tube. It's very flexible and easy to use. So you connect the two together. Then we'll stick the CO2 tubing, the airline tubing, right there. We'll put the diffuser inside the tank, about there. Alright, so now we just have to wait for the CO2 to start coming out. It's gonna take a while, a few minutes, a few hours maybe. The warmer the water is that you put in here, the faster the CO2 will build up. But the water I put in wasn't that warm. It was just a little bit more. I don't know how to explain temperature here, but yeah, we're gonna wait a bit. So while we wait, let's work on something else. What I want to work on today is I want to build this table up here, the little countertop, so that we can start organizing our stuff better. So I've just varnished it, and I've been letting it dry since this morning. It's right here. Take a look at the garden, by the way. The weeds are starting to grow back because it's getting warmer, so that's kind of a bummer, but yeah. This thing right here, I varnished it, it's all shiny and it looks kind of nice. So let's go bring this inside and put it up. Alright, so I've gotten this far. I've got the, what are these called? The brackets attached. Now we've just got to get it on the wall. But I forgot one important thing. I've got to cut out a section over here for this pipe to fit through. So yeah, my mistake. I forgot to cut that out. So I'm gonna cut that out. But before I do, take a look at the CO2. It's already running, and there's quite a lot of it. So you can just see how simple it is to make your own CO2. The only downside to this is that you're going to have to remake this in the next few weeks. For me, this usually tends to last about 3 weeks to a month. What you can also do to try to make this thing last longer is you can use one of these valves that you use to control the air for your sponge filters. You can attach that onto here and try to control the amount of CO2 that comes out, but I really don't bother. It's super cheap to make your own CO2. Also, if you put this on, you gotta be really careful, because if you turn it off, this thing could explode, and I really don't want to risk that. So if you do decide to use these valves, just be very careful, and I don't take any responsibility if something bad happens to you. So just be careful, and yeah, this is my CO2 method. Very simple, very easy, and pretty effective. And look at it, super cool. It's all like bubbling up in there. If you want something a little bit more detailed than this, if you want a bubble counter with it, a DIY bubble counter or something like that, I'll put a link down below to 𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀's version of her DIY CO2. It's very similar to this, except she does a few extra steps and hers is a little bit more like professional. Mine is just the lazy method, but it's super simple, super clean, and it works really nicely. Alright, so it's been 3 days since I set the DIY CO2 up, and it seems to be doing pretty well. So on the first day, the day we set it up, you saw that there was a lot of CO2 coming out, but then the day after, the second day, it started to look like this. So you can see that there's less CO2, and this is how it's going to go for the next few weeks until it runs out. You can see it's foamed up a lot, and some of the foam has got into the tubing and into the CO2 diffuser as well. And that is my mistake. I forgot one step. That step is to add a drop of oil into this, cooking oil or whatever. 𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀, as I mentioned before, her steps are more descriptive and a little bit more advanced than this. So if you put oil in here, you're going to have less foam than this right here. So yeah, but still, even though there's a little bit of foam in the diffuser, it's washable. You can clean it out later, so I don't really mind that. And it's not going to get into the tank, so it doesn't really matter. In my last video, when we set this tank up, the 𝗲𝗂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 tank, I asked you guys if we should add CO2 into this tank, DIY CO2, or have this tank run without CO2, and the comments were really mixed. I received a lot of comments from you saying that we shouldn't have CO2 in this tank, and I also received a lot of comments saying we should put CO2 into this tank, and it was really a hard decision to make, but in the end I really want to put some CO2 into this tank because dwarf hairgrass is pretty hard. It's a pretty challenging plant to grow without CO2, so yeah, just this time we need DIY CO2 for this tank. In the future, we're definitely going to have some tanks without CO2. I'm planning on it. I'm thinking of a beta nano tank that's run without CO2. I think that'll be really fun, and a few other planted tanks that will be run without CO2. But for the tanks that will sit on this stand, these 3 tanks, I really want them to be lush and planted and green. You can see this tank is a mess right now. My pleco is still in that tank. I've got a little pleco hiding in the cave right there. You can kind of see his tail there, but yeah, my one single pleco, I've got to move him into that tank up there, and then we're going to set this up as probably a Dutch style tank. I was thinking either Dutch or diorama, but I really prefer Dutch style. So it's going to be lush planted. We're going to have an 𝗲𝗂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀, well, we already have an 𝗲𝗂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 simple planted tank with a nice carpet, and then we have a nature style aquarium. So I think it'll be a good combination. 3 different style tanks. It's gonna be really, really fun. So let me know what you all think of the DIY CO2 in the comments below. Let me know, do you like it? Do you think you're gonna try this out? Or do you have a method that you prefer compared to this? I really like this method. It's super simple, super clean. You just need a bottle, a hose, and your CO2 diffuser, and that's basically it. I don't really like the 2-bottle method. The 2-bottle method is just a little bit harder to maintain, and it takes up more space, and that's really what I don't like about it. So I like my 1-bottle method technique. Let me know what you guys think, and also take a look at this right here. We've completed this whole setup. So we've got the little countertop right here, and yeah, I'm slowly starting to organize things. So it's kind of hard to see because the sunlight is just coming in through there, but yeah, I've got my salt and sugar. The sugar, as we saw earlier, is for my DIY CO2. The salt is for my brine shrimp hatchery. I've got some brine shrimp eggs in this little container. My brine shrimp hatchery right here. I don't use it all the time. I only use it when I get some fry hatching out, like my rainbow fish fry, and hopefully trying to breed some angelfish soon, so I'll be using this for that. Up here, I just did this morning, but I put this little container box that we got from the dollar store, and I'm storing my melamine sponges in here. These are to clean fish tanks, And then I've got my wire brushes stored here to clean the filter hoses and the lily pipes. And yeah, everything is coming along nicely. We've got this little bucket. I've had this for a while now and I use it quite a lot. So this is for water changes. When I want to water change quite a lot of water, I'll drain out the water into this little bucket, and yeah, and I can roll it along. I made the little cart there, the trolley, so that I can wheel it around the place, and yeah, and then there's the water filter stored there. So I just keep this right here, and it kind of looks pretty neat and tidy. Let me know what you think of that. Now, of course, I'm still not finished with this fish room. There's still a lot of things I need to do. One thing, for example, is that wall right there. I want to paint this wall white, and one thing I really want to do here is I kind of want to build a magazine rack. So on the wall, we'll have like a simple rack, and we can put some fish magazines, and I think it'll be pretty interesting. There's no way I'm going to put a fish tank here. I can fit a fish tank, but I really want this room to look nice, and I don't want it to be full of tanks, because having too many tanks is a good thing, but it's also a bad thing. I definitely can fit more fish tanks in this room. I can definitely put one here, but I really want to control myself. I'm already having a lot of fish tanks in this place. You can see like behind me, around me, there's fish tanks everywhere. So I want to make sure I have fun and make sure I'm able to maintain all the tanks at the same time. And yeah, we just gotta keep control of ourselves. As always, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to give a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. We're definitely going to be doing more updates on this tank and seeing how this dwarf hairgrass turns out. I hope it really starts growing. It should, with the help of the DIY CO2, but we'll have to wait and see. And also, subscribe, because the IAPLC contest is coming up soon. My contest tank that's sitting right there is it's doing quite alright, and I haven't been making a lot of videos of that tank this year, but I've been making a few, and those videos should come out in the next few months, so definitely watch out for those. But I'll see you guys next time.